I don't think we're bothered with the sea somehow. We seem to be concentrating on the drink and...
A stick of rock.
Hello and welcome to My Queer Museum, the video version. My name is Daren Kay and I'm going to be the host on this special edition of our series of films produced by Queer Heritage South. Today we've been invited into the very fabulous home of Geoff and Chris, long-term residents of Brighton and active members of the LGBTQ community here in the city for well over 40 years. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to Chris and Geoff and the 4 objects that they want to put into their queer museum.
Hello, I'm Chris and I've lived in Brighton for over 40 years now with my partner Geoff of 60 years, so it's all the zeros.
Yes, I'm Geoff, and as Chris said, we've been together for 60 years, lived in Brighton since 1983. I used to, before I met Chris, I'm afraid, I used to come to Brighton with a group of friends. One of us might have a car, we'd find someone with a car that would drive us down, and we would visit all the gay pubs in Brighton at the time, like the Greyhound, the upstairs bar in the Greyhound, which was famous. I don't know what the people downstairs thought, because it was just the upstairs. Once you got upstairs, it was a gay world, and the Spotted Dog and the Curtain Club and all those things which you would only get in the West End. I lived in South London, so there was nothing like that. So it was an excitement, and it was a very cosmopolitan area. You felt it. It really had a great feeling of...
and by the sea.
And by the sea too. Brighton has always been a destination for us, and we wanted to get there, and it was full of nice clubs. And what was the club we used to go to?
The Beverly Hills.
The Beverly Hills.
I mean, the first 3 months we were out nearly every night to all the bars and different clubs, because it was such a novelty. We had just sold a pub in Chichester, which was a very, very busy house, the busiest place we've ever had, I think, really. So it was just 24/7 work. So to have freedom to go out at night and have a gin or whatever it was wonderful. But of course it faded quite quickly. It gets all a bit monotonous, same old thing, but fun at the time. The first object we would like to donate to the museum is a pair of torchets, which are originally made in Paris. The moulds were from Paris, but they made them right through to the mid 1900s. And we used to sell those in follies occasionally, because they were very pricey, but they were a big draw, big attraction, brought people into the shop. I don't know if Geoff explained to you, they were taken from very old, originally French plaster cast models, and they carried on with those same casts for years and years, and I think it's only in the last few years that
they've closed down. They were in Paris, and we imported them from Paris because I just thought they were so sensational and so different, and we wanted different things when we had the shop Follies. Follies was quite exciting because we'd always had restaurants, and we went to Florida one year and we went to Disney World, and we were fascinated. Chris has been fascinated with Mickey Mouse forever, and we have a collection upstairs of hundreds and hundreds of Mickey Mouse. It's so much so that most of it is now in the loft in black plastic sacks, and we decided we were going to come back and open a Disney shop in Brighton.
Control freak.
And I went to see Disney. They were very enthusiastic. They thought it was a wonderful idea. We can land a helicopter with Mickey Mouse on the Pavilion Gardens. And everything was fine. 6 months went past before we actually signed the lease or bought the shop. And I went back. And in that meantime, they started to think about it themselves and thought, this is a good idea, and started to think about opening their own Disney shops. So they didn't want any competition, and so it wasn't quite so...
It would have made it a glorified toy shop.
So, and now we didn't want a toy shop. We wanted something that had gifts for everyone, Anyway, so we decided to open this shop called Follies, and it was a great success from the start. It was really, as the title suggests, they were all follies, things that perhaps you don't need, but were nice to look at. And
if you remember, we used to go to sort of trade shows because you enter into a new world of business, and it is a completely new world. It was absolutely foreign. And went to these various trade shows in London and Birmingham. And because you realise this is why all the shops, they've all got the same stuff, because that's all that you can buy. So Geoff started to put adverts in the local paper saying there must be people out there who are very artistic and creative. Have you got anything that you would like to sell? Just so that we could have pieces in the shop that were different to the run-of-the-mill shop. And we did, and we got different things that way, and also met some fascinating people. Yeah. We met a wonderful lady, and I can mention her name because she's since passed. She was the biggest character we've ever met, called Honoria Plesh. And she was responsible for all the 4 mechanical windows of the Lions Corner houses in London.
In the 40s and the 50s, setting the period.
Yes. And she was also, before that, she was a set designer for Cochrane, and she was very sort of involved in theatre and film.
All the pre-war 1930s films, she was doing set designs and things like that.
So she started to make these peddler dolls, and really they were, I think you had to sort of believe in them, really. It was sort of like a pile of junk with all bits sort of hanging on. And some of them...
peddler dolls were a Victorian thing where they carried around trays and they sold all bits and pieces that you might want or not want.
But these didn't look like that, not towards the end, did they? They were a bit messy. But she used to charge us a fortune for them, and we had to put a bit of money on because, we were in business. But they did sell. They were sort of quite unusual pieces.
They were collector's pieces. So our second object that we want to show is the newsletter on the Sussex Beacon, because we were very involved in raising money, and that's really was quite important to us, and it's important to a lot of people I know, but that was quite important at the time.
So yes, we were quite heavily involved with fundraising for the Beacon, which was a big project because it was the first hospice that was opening for people with HIV and AIDS. And we did, I think it was 2, maybe even 3 big sort of gala balls at the Grand Hotel in Brighton, which raised a lot of money. And it was like a dinner and dance, and they'd have sort of celebrity people coming on in between the courses to entertain us with jokes or playing an instrument, tissue paper on comb, whatever it was at the time. We had Follies, and we sold that and moved out of Brighton for 6 months, and we got involved with sort of charity work. We were retired for about five years then, and we got very involved with raising funds, and because our assertiveness came back as it does when you're in business. And Geoff said we could do this again, we could do it for ourselves, we're doing it for other people. And then we hit the recession, we were hanging, like a lot of people, hanging on to everything by our fingernails. And Geoff said, I think we're going to have to go back into business. And that's when we bought the Regency Tavern. But we did a lot of fundraising for the Beacon to sort of raise funds to get it set up and get involved with it.
We started off by organising a New Year's Eve party called Over the Top, Under the Rock, and that was just around the corner in the Rock pub, just in Kemp Town there. And that was a great success, and I thought, we can do this, we can do bring and buy sales, and we wrote to different manufacturers and asked them to give us things for the tombola and all that sort of thing, because there was a big ball at the Brighton Grand, and I think how many presents were wrapped? About 200 presents
or more, all in pink with pink ribbons. Everyone,
I've got a photograph somewhere
of
all the presents all piled up.
And you bought a ticket for a £5 or whatever, and you got one of these presents, and it could be rubbish, or it could be a pair of tickets to Andrew Lloyd Webber's latest show, something like that. Because Geoff was you sent off about 350 letters, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
All these big sort of impresarios, but because they're always wanting fundraising and.
But I know the people I don't like and the people I do now from the reply. I put an advert in the Argus and said, we're doing bring and buy sale, and we want anyone that has anything they want to get rid of, old clothes or anything like that, we would be happy to take them. And I went to one, I had a phone call from this lady and she said, my brother's just died and I wonder if you would like to take some of his stuff. And I said, I would love to. I'll bring the car around. And she was piling up clothes and she said, there's a couple of boxes there. I haven't opened them. I don't know what's in them, but there might be something. They're all his belongings. And I got home and I opened these boxes and they were full of old used dildos. They were greasy and horrible and unspeakable, really. And I put them in the garden, and I had a big bucket of soapy water, and I was washing all these in the garden. I thought, can I sell these to bring them by? I'm not sure.
You didn't?
I think we picked out some of the better ones.
No, only as a lamp base. The third object we would like to put into our museum is a set of gold cherubs that we used in the Regency Tavern when we first bought it. We had just sort of managed to scrape through a recession and we felt we had to get back into business, and we bought the Regency Tavern and it was an absolute dump, and we closed it for 5-6 days and got a load of friends to come in and help paint it, decorate it, strip things out, make up curtains and things. And that was the first week, 10 days of it, and it just went from strength to strength after that, and it became quite a big mark in Brighton at the time. And then lots of write-ups. One time we were voted Pub of the Year by the Sunday Times, was it? Or Telegraph?
Yeah, we won the Sunday Times Pub of the Year for the South.
Yeah.
We won a few other awards too. We actually stayed there at that pub longer than we'd stayed anywhere else. We were there for 12 years.
It was very glamorous, very over the top. Geoff's very artistic because he started out in life in design and display, so everything had that sort of theatrical touch. And gold cherubs everywhere with gold tasselled ropes and striped hand-painted wallpaper was quite striking, and it wasn't like a regular pub. There were no red barrels or any horse brasses, nothing like that. Well, the gentleman's toilet was...
That ball came out of the gentleman's toilet, that mirror ball. We had that spinning around in the toilet. We had the walls covered in...
It's been cleaned.
Right. This ball came out of the gentleman's toilets in the Regency Tavern, and we had the walls covered in flat mirror tiles. So it was quite something to see that spinning around with spotlights. And we've actually, a couple of times, people have tried to steal it. We've actually seen them going out with it under their jumper, and I said, excuse me, we'll have the ball back, thank you very much. But that's...
It was quite... We won an award for Best Loos because the ladies' toilet, we had another friend, it was from Geoff's display days, he was an artist, and you walked through into a little lobby and he painted it all in pink and did a whole scene. It was like an old Pollock's theatre with little boxes and drapes and people sitting in the boxes looking out, and that was very much a talking
So as
point.
you walked in...
Everyone had to be rushed to the ladies' toilet.
There was a little sea of faces, people looking at you, which was a talking point.
Yes. And somebody said to us once, a lady, when we were in Wiltshire, she was a very grand lady and she had a marvellous manor house, and she used to float through in these long chiffon caftans and things. And she said, darling, she said, it's the nearest thing to show business. Every night's the first night without a dress rehearsal. And it's true.
Mm. And I do think our life has been based on theatre. I love theatre, and everything should be theatre. A restaurant should be theatre. The very first pub we had in Wiltshire, I mean, it wasn't a dreary little pub, but it was an old-fashioned 16th century pub or something with beams and things. And I thought, there's got to be things for people to look at. When people are sitting in a pub drinking, there's got to be articles to look at. So we filled the pub with bits and pieces and antiques and things. And I feel the same about restaurants or anything. So I think everything that we've done, I mean, even the shop, Follies, we had trees growing in the shop. They weren't growing. We went out and gathered all these great big tree trunks.
You bought a dead tree, didn't you?
We bought a dead tree and we had branches, and then every season we would change all the blossoms.
The foliage.
In the spring, blossom.
That was
Autumn, we had
theatrical.
brown leaves and things. So we changed the seasons every year.
I mean, you may have a slight clue looking around here that perhaps our home is a little theatrical. I don't know how others see it.
Someone said, we decided to him, he said, we decided your pub, he said, you must have had like a star on the floor where you stood. He said, because the light seemed to just hit you and you had all this jewellery, he said, and you were sparkling like mad.
It's not true.
Also, can I just say that because we were near the Brighton Centre, we had a lot of famous people come in. We had people like Katie Lang, she came in for lunch. So we had a lot of those stars that came in, or the Theatre Royal.
Nigel Kennedy, the violin boy.
Yes, he came in.
Katie Lang, as you've already mentioned.
Yes. And who were the women in Cell Block H?
Oh, yes. Quite a few soap stars came in.
They were actresses, but quite honestly, I don't think they changed character from Cell Block H because they were so hard and tough. Either side of the pub, we had a brothel. We had one brothel that was a lot of older ladies and another brothel that was for younger ladies. And they each had a different clientele. And that was quite interesting. We had some fantastic characters living around that area in the same way we have here in Sussex Square.
But the basic sort of clientele, it was very, very mixed, from 18 to 80. All sorts, all walks of life, full of the sort of characters you would expect to see anywhere in Brighton. Knocker boys from the lanes, few villains on the side, a few girls of the night.
Few drag queens.
Gay people, transsexuals, everything really, every sort of sort you could manage.
Yeah.
In fact, a nice little story was we were up in London in Regent Street and went into Wedgwood. They were having a white sale. And I saw a jug there that a friend of mine wanted, a white jug. And a very nice boy behind the counter said, oh, I remember you. You've got the Regency Tavern in Brighton. I said, yes. I said, have you been in? He said, I love that pub. He said, and I felt so comfortable. I brought my mother and father in, and I actually came out to my mother and father in that pub. He said, because I felt so proud. I said, I hope she didn't say, I'm not going to turn out like that one behind the bar. But it was a nice story and I was quite flattered.
Yes. I have a little story too. Because we were a free house, we could deal with any brewers that we liked. And the big line always from the brewers was, what market are you aiming for? What market are you aiming for? And I used to say, anyone between 18 and 80 that's got a money in their pocket, a pound in their pocket, and we don't discriminate. We want everyone. Mink coats, overalls, we don't care. We used to have a lot of older ladies that would come in because they felt unthreatened in the pub. They didn't feel they were entering just a man's world. We were open to everyone. And I used to say to all the staff behind the bar, you speak to everyone, you ask them a few questions, because maybe that's their only contact with someone, a human being, that day. And it doesn't matter if they got half a pint of beer or even just a coffee. That doesn't matter. It's important that you speak. You'll know the people that don't want to speak.
And I think having such a cross-section and such a mixture of people did give that particular pub, because we'd had a few beforehand, but it gave that particular pub a very special atmosphere, because people make an atmosphere, and without the people you wouldn't have had an atmosphere, you wouldn't have had a pub, you wouldn't have had a business. So it did make it special, such a cross-section.
People are at the base of everything in life, aren't they? The people that you meet and the people you attract. And I think that was the whole thing about the Regency Tavern. You never knew who was going to be in there. You never know who you might be talking to, and I liked it that way. So the fourth object is our marriage certificate. It means so much. It really means so much. I suppose out of everything, the wedding certificate or the certificate for the civil ceremony is the most important thing. Brighton had a list, a register that you could register a year before if you wanted to be on the list of people to get civil ceremony. And we did that, and we were on the second day. And it was a very strange experience to know, having lived through a situation where it was against the law and we had no rights with each other. After being together for 43 years, as we were at that time, it was wonderful to be able to do that civil ceremony and know that we were partners, and if anything happened to me or him, the other person would be responsible and get everything that we'd worked for. And it was a wonderful feeling. So this is a ring that Chris gave me on our first anniversary. So I always associate that with our marriage certificate, because for me that's a wedding ring. I suppose today I might have settled for a much bigger ring, but that's another story. But this is worn down. It was bigger than this.
I was a jobbing apprentice, Geoff, in the hairdressers. I couldn't afford 40 carats in those days.
But it is gold. It is gold.
Civil ceremony, for me, it was an embarrassing day. We didn't want anybody to know. We had just sold the pub, just come out of the pub, and we didn't know whether to have a big party for thousands of people or to just creep off and do something. And the civil ceremony came up, so we said we'll go for the civil ceremony and we'll go away for a honeymoon and not do the big party. But it was embarrassing because obviously people knew what we were. We'd never tried to sort of hide anything, but to sort of stand up with a witness to say, you know, to declare what you were was quite sort of strange for us. I'd never spoken about it before. Once it was all over, I thought, we should have done it again with 4 white horses and a carriage. But we didn't, and that's the way it was. It's different now because everyone's done it. I remember all the registrars were very excited down there because they were saying, isn't this wonderful? We're making history. We're at the start of history. No one's done this before. And I said, really? I mean, I was not really fazed by it at the time. It meant more afterwards. Getting married was really quite a non-event. And we did it because people had said to us, we said, we've done the civil ceremony, that covers us for all the tax situations. They said, but it's if you travel, and we do travel quite a lot now, some countries won't accept the civil partnership certificate, but they will accept a marriage. So we went along and did it. But as I said, it was a non-event. We sat with the registrar for half an hour, who was telling us about his broken love life. All we had to do was to hand over a passport and a utility bill. Romantic it wasn't. And then we went to TK Maxx.
I mean, because I grew up in the 50s and that, where you couldn't really come out as gay, you know. We never tried to hide it with Chris and I. Oh, I didn't meet him until the 60s anyway. But I mean, my upbringing was, you played it pretty straight, really. I mean, I used to go to gay pubs and things in the West End and the East End. The East End was the friendliest place ever, far more accepting than anywhere else. It was wonderful because you've got all those old barrow boys and greengrocers, and they couldn't care less what sexuality you were.
Live and let live. Wow.
And I mean, I used to go to a pub called the Dragon in the East End, and it was a famous old gay pub because the landlord he used to do drag every night, and he ran this pub, and it was wonderful, and everyone used to go. The Craze used to go, all those sort of people, you know, and everyone was accepting. I mean, I think to myself sometimes, it's only when you get older and you look back on your life and you think, my God, the things I've done, you know, unbelievable, really.
It's only when you're in a situation like this and you as a team have come along and you start, it's thought-provoking. You think, oh, yes, I did this and I did that, and it's...
Wonderful time, wonderful.